What ultimately led to the decision for the Saints to fire Dennis Allen?
I think 7 losses in a row was kind of
I think
what
that
did
had
it.
something to do with it. No, look, it was 6 losses in a row, and then it was losing to Carolina. How many did that count for? 6 more? Was that like double? Like, I think the Carolina loss was like equal to the 6 losses previous before.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, I think they just couldn't do anything right. I mean, obviously they were super injured and that played a part, but then you get healthy and you can't beat Carolina. That's the final straw at that point. And they were unable to just kind of overcome the stuff they were working against. And at a certain point, you got to find a way to win a game, and they couldn't find a way to win a game. And I think it was just like a culmination of things. Honestly, for me, people are always, hey, like, call for his job, whatever, all that stuff. Like, for me, there were 2 points where if I were the GM of the Saints, I would have fired him. And the second one was Sunday. Like, that was it for me. They lost that game. I was done. I wrote the story. Like, it's over. You got to make a change. It's time to move on. Dennis Allen didn't work. The other time I would have fired him, and I'm still outraged by this, and I don't think enough people were. Like, if you go back and you look at our show from after this game, like, I'm freaking out about it, and everybody's looking at me like I'm kind of nuts. It was the Jamal Williams run. That was, to me, full-on mutiny from the team. They defied their coach. They ran the ball. They stood in support of Jameis Winston. After that, they tweeted about it. They posted on social media. And to me, that was like, you have to fire him. It's absolutely over. And lo and behold, like, hey, it's not that big of a deal. I don't know why everybody was freaking out. Like, all right, but James Hurst then puts out a video on Monday saying we couldn't believe he didn't get fired. Like, we're sitting in the locker room. Mickey Loomis says he's coming down to talk to us. We think he's going to fire him. And they come in and they just kind of like stand against us. And he's like, the right way to do it, and I think I made the same exact point, was you go to the podium and you say, F the Falcons, whatever, stop us if you can't do it. And then you walk in the locker room and say, F the team, F you guys, listen to me, and you tear them out. But to me, that was the only other time I would have fired him. I was on the brink at one point, and then they won 4 or 5. But then that was the other time where I was like, I cannot believe they're still doing this. But they brought it back. To DA's credit, I think he fixed a lot of stuff behind the scenes that I had big issues with. I thought his messaging this year was a lot better. It wasn't, a year ago, every time after a loss, it was kind of like, well, our leaders, well, our team, well, our execution. And there was still some of that, but it wasn't as much. It didn't feel like Derek Carr had one set of
rules.
I don't even know, standards, one set of. It was just nothing was ever Derek Carr's fault last year. This year, some stuff was Derek Carr's fault. Kind of got thrown under the bus under the last game a little bit, even saying he was like rusty or whatever. But, it just didn't work, though. And then they lost 7, and I feel like the weight of everything fell on it. And, I was hearing stuff from a lot of players about how, things were going wrong and how they fell apart. And it was, how it wasn't working, how they were frustrated, how the locker room was lost. And, I got a story on the site detailing like a lot of things that happened behind the scenes that led to that. I'm not going to give those away on here. If you're signed up to the site, you read them. If you aren't signed up to the site, do it. But, there was a lot that just went wrong, and it was just too much. Like, at a certain point, it was just too much.
A couple of things. First of all, the Week 18 game last year, it's interesting. I did not think the play itself was the act of mutiny at the time. Like, I understood how Jameis is like, hey, let's get him a touchdown, and the guys in the huddle, like, I didn't think they were all like, let's do this to Dennis Allen. Like, I think they were getting him a touchdown. But you're absolutely right that the mutiny came when he didn't stand by them. That was almost the worst.
I think it's
the
both,
worst
though.
Occurrence. Yeah,
because you don't give a shit what your coach thinks at that point.
Yeah.
You don't care. You're standing against them. I mean, there's no like, if the coach says don't do this and you're saying, you know what, F him, we're doing it. That's mutiny. That's the start of a mutiny. That's daring him to do something.
But look, the phrase we used a lot last year, and that was the best example of it, was there's like a substitute teacher vibe around him all the time, like the respect level of he's an authority figure, and we'll get our homework done, and we'll take the test, but we all know what it means when there's a substitute teacher in the room. You don't think there's the same level of respect, the same level of ramifications. The other phrase we've used that I think was always perfect with Dennis Allen is he's a win with coach, but not a win because of coach. So I pointed this out on Twitter. I think a lot of people took it as a defense of Mickey Loomis or Dennis Allen. I didn't mean it to. Very clear from Mickey Loomis's comments that he didn't want this to be the decision. I don't know if it was completely against his will or if it's something he reluctantly reached the conclusion of doing, but he pointed to the injuries again. He said he's a fantastic coach and there were a bunch of injuries, but the end of that statement, he said, the circumstances got to the point and we haven't been able to overcome them, and that puts pressure and stress on the organization. Ultimately, it was cause for a change. Dennis Allen has proven over the last 3 years, he's been dealt a horrible hand. I mean, Drew Brees retired, Sean Payton left, the salary cap hit this team, their roster wasn't as good anymore, injuries hit this team. They felt like a 500 type of team, and they needed a coach to lift them above 500. He couldn't. He could not overcome the circumstances. He did not make this team better than their roster. He did not make this team better than their injuries. And when that avalanche hit, he had no answers to get them out of it, and it was just getting worse. So that doesn't mean that he couldn't have had success if he coached this team in the right era or with the right roster or with the right health, but he could not overcome these circumstances. And that happened multiple years in a row. So I get it.
I got one more point to make on the Week 18 though. Like
Yeah.
in if you are at the goal line and your coach calls for a kneel down and you run a fake kneel down and score a touchdown, you are saying, F him, we're putting all the pressure on him. He has to answer for this. We're going to make it look like he called it. That is maybe the greatest example of mutiny I could ever think of. That's not just like going in the huddle and being like, no, I called it different play. Like that's like putting your finger in his eye and being like, we're doing this to you. Like now you have to answer for it. And you're sending a message upstairs. Like that to me says, and I'm just interpreting it, like that to me says, we did this thing the whole year. We told you guys the whole year we're playing for each other. We're going to keep playing hard. We're not going to quit. The easiest way to get him fired would have been to quit on the field. But it's saying we got to the last play of the season and now we're throwing our middle finger up at him. And that's what it said to me. And the James Hurst video kind of alludes to like the idea that they just didn't give a shit. Like they were just doing whatever they wanted. And at that point, DA has to answer for it. And he handled it. I understand him not wanting that on his resume. I understand DA's response. But in that situation, I feel like you have to protect your guys and then you go cuss them out. And, Sean just did the same thing to Denver, and it wasn't that, but it was just like stop us from scoring. Like if you don't want to, I think if you do that, that's an easy way to kind of endear yourself to the team, and then also show
huge opportunity,
and then also show them that you aren't going to take nothing because you're going to chew them out for it. And I think that would have earned a lot of respect, and I think it would have went a long way. I really do.
We'll get back to the Week 18 win against the Falcons a little bit later, but who ultimately, Mike, you alluded to it a little bit, who ultimately made the decision? You can tell from the official statement from the team, some of the comments yesterday on the radio, that Mickey Loomis didn't want Dennis Allen to go right now. So who ultimately did it come down to?
There's two things here. Well, there's one thing here. Like it was Gail Benson's decision. And again, I detailed this in a story. Won't give it all away, but like she went and met with players last week before this game, and the decision was. I was like the way I initially heard this, and I didn't believe it because of the way I heard it, was that the decision was made to fire him, win or lose. And I wouldn't say that right now unless I just read Albert Breer like report the same thing, and I had heard that and I dismissed it. I was like, there is no way they would make the decision to fire him if they win this game. Like he wins this game and you're firing him on Monday, but that's how I believe that was the decision. And if they win the game, does that feeling change it? Possibly. Like you could win the game and then say, well, all right, they won. I'm not going to do this on Monday. But like on like Friday, I think like that was the thought process. Now, a lot of stuff has to happen for that follow through to come through. But like I had heard it said like that, and I was like, there is no way. Like that is not actually how they were talking about it. And then like Breer heard the same thing, like the best reporter in the league. So I think that's what the thinking was in the building. But yeah, I think it was spearheaded by her, absolutely. And I do believe that Mickey would have got to the point, and I believe that Mickey would have done it, like at the end of the season, if it was determined this had not worked. I don't think Mickey was afraid of firing him. I think he would have did it. I think that it was probably closer to the point like last year. Like the thought was probably in his head at some point last year, and then they turned it around. Like if they hadn't turned it around, I think Mickey would have done it last year. I disagree with the thought process on the Week 18 game, but whatever. Like he turned it around, whatever. Like you wanted to give him more life. I get it. We would have differed there, but I'm not killing him for that. Like saying, hey, I'm going to figure it out with this guy. But I do think at the end of the season he would have did it. But I just don't think. And we haven't talked to him, so I don't know. I haven't been able to ask him the question, like what he actually thought about this. So I'm not trying to like speak for him, but in previous conversations, talking to him, reporting, all that stuff, like I just think it's his firm belief that firing a coach in season is not something that philosophically he agrees with. But that doesn't mean that he never would have fired him. I truly think at the end of this year, had it not turned around, I think he would have fired him.
And also, just because of the circumstances, I mean, we said this a bunch of times. I think Mickey Loomis saw excuses for the rock bottom stretch of the 4 losses with Derek Carr starting in Kansas City and Spencer Rattler starting the 3 games after that. And he was willing to be like, all right, let's see what the next 9 weeks looks like. If things look better, then maybe he's not going to be like. I think he wanted more time to see how Dennis Allen did with the roster back healthy. But losing in Carolina, like maybe he would been more strongly against it if they beat Carolina, like you said. I don't know, but losing to Carolina just sort of took all the defense arguments off the table. Like you couldn't really stand on the table to keep Dennis Allen after they lost in Carolina.